By late 1944, the U.S. Army held superiority in armor, air power, and artillery across Western Europe. Then American generals sent 33,000 men into 50 square miles of German forest, where none of that mattered. An open valley route ran just southeast of the trees. It was never taken. 6 American divisions would be ground down in the Hürtgen, and the reason begins with a command decision no one was willing to reverse. A 30-kilometer corridor of open valley ran southeast of the Hürtgen Forest, shorter, flatter, and lined with secondary roads wide enough for armored columns. Cartographic overlays from September 1944 show this valley route tracing the lowlands between the Ruhr and Würm rivers, its macadam surface averaging 9 meters across, gradients gentle, and bridges mostly intact as of mid-October. Engineering reports measured the Eichenbach and Lichtenau bridges at an 18-meter span, timber-supported, and rated for 12-ton loads, enough for a Sherman tank, if not a full armored battalion at once. Even in autumn, the valley's compacted surface allowed movement at 10 kilometers per hour except where mud or snow slowed the pace. The key choke point, Lichtenau Bridge, forced any mechanized advance to stagger its crossing, but the entire march to the Rohr dams could be completed in under 36 hours with sustained movement. Reconnaissance patrols confirmed the valley's viability, noting only moderate German fortifications, and a defensive presence anchored by the 272nd Infantry Division, with field guns positioned on high ground. American staff briefings logged the valley as a passable, if exposed, route, with bottlenecks at the bridges but far fewer obstacles than the forest's maze of ravines and tree-choked trails. Intelligence annexes acknowledged the risk of German artillery covering the open ground, yet projected casualties and delays were lower than for the forest approach. The valley was not taken. Orders from 1st Army headquarters dismissed the route, citing uncertainty over bridge capacity and the danger of concentrating forces at a single crossing. Instead, the main thrust was ordered through the forest, where terrain would erase every American advantage. The existence of the valley is not a footnote. It is the measure of the choice that followed. Inside the Hürtgen Forest, American firepower counted for little. German engineers, following Model's doctrine, had transformed the woods into a calibrated kill zone. Every 500 meters, a fire lane cut through the trees, giving German artillery and machine guns a clear field of fire. Bundesarchiv maps from late 1944 show these corridors, each marked with pre-registered coordinates. The forest floor was seeded with mines and barbed wire, but the real trap was invisible. The entire interior was mapped for instant, overlapping barrages. The Kahl Trail, the only supply route for the American advance, wound through ravines so steep that gradients reached 30% in places. Its single-track width, less than 2 meters at the narrowest, meant vehicles could only move one at a time. After-action reports from the 22nd Infantry Regiment described stalled convoys, ambulances, and ammunition trucks packed nose to tail, waiting hours under direct artillery fire. When a tank or half-track was hit, the trail clogged and the entire front ground to a halt. Over 18 days in November, the 22nd Regiment lost 2,773 men, 85% of its strength, trying to push a few kilometers through this engineered maze. The forest was not impassable, but it was designed to punish every step forward. The enemy did not need to outfight American forces. They only needed to let the terrain and American decisions do the work. Order number 44-1, issued by Lieutenant General Courtney Hodges on September 6, 1944, directed 7th Corps under J. Lawton Collins to advance through the Hürtgen sector toward the Rohr dams. The operation was shaped not by field conditions, but by a rigid chain of directives extending from SHAEF through the 12th Army Group down to division level. 6 infantry divisions, 1st, 4th, 8th, 9th, 28th, and 83rd were assigned to the Hürtgen advance, each cycling in as casualties mounted and exhaustion set in. The rotation schedule, mapped in NARA operational orders and confirmed by after-action reports, moved units through the forest on a timetable that ignored both terrain and tactical feedback. A cost-benefit analysis, CB 4412, circulated by 1st Army G2 on October 25th, recommended a flanking maneuver along the Ruhr Valley, projecting half the casualties and a faster timetable. This memorandum was filed but never acted upon. Instead, the First Army Command Council reaffirmed the direct force assault on November 2nd, citing the need for visible progress and the imperative to secure the dams at all costs. Headquarters remained 12 kilometers behind the front, issuing orders by radio and courier. Commanders like Collins and Hodges operated from Wassenach and Gießen, insulated from the immediate consequences of their directives. Delays in courier traffic, sometimes up to 48 hours, meant that revised orders often arrived after fresh losses had already been incurred. The result was a cycle of attrition, with divisions fed into the forest according to a plan that had become an end in itself. In the Hürtgen, bureaucracy became the battle plan, and attrition was the inevitable outcome. American doctrine promised victory through speed, firepower, and overwhelming support. Inside the Hürtgen Forest, those promises dissolved into arithmetic. 6 divisions, the 1st, the 4th, the 8th, the 9th, the 28th, and the 83rd, were fed into the woods in sequence, each one depleted before the next arrived. The 28th Infantry Division, known as the Bloody Bucket, entered the line in early November with 14,500 men. By the end of the month, more than 5,000 were killed or wounded. The division collapsed as a fighting force and was withdrawn for complete refit on December 30th. The 22nd Infantry Regiment, part of the 4th Division, recorded 2,773 casualties in just 18 days, 85% of its authorized strength, while advancing a few kilometers and capturing a single village. The 4th Division as a whole suffered 4,053 battle casualties in November alone, plus more than 2,000 non-combat losses from exposure, disease, and exhaustion. The official campaign tally stands at approximately 33,000 American casualties, killed, wounded, missing, and non-combat losses within a 50 square mile sector. These are not estimates. They are the numbers filed in after action reports and division returns, each one a ledger entry for a strategy that traded men for meters. The forest could be survived. The attrition imposed by command decisions could not. In the Hürtgen, the cost of ignoring alternatives was measured in entire divisions, erased from the order of battle. Tanks arrived at the forest's edge with every advantage on paper, armor, firepower, and the promise of speed. Inside, those strengths collapsed. The Shermans and tank destroyers, built for open ground, found their turrets scraping tree trunks and their treads sinking into mud. Forward movement narrowed to single file along rutted tracks, less than 2 meters wide in places. When a lead vehicle was hit or mired, the entire column stopped, blocking supply and evacuation. Air superiority, the other American trump card, was grounded by the weather. Overcast skies blanketed the Hürtgen for weeks, reducing visibility to a few dozen meters and keeping fighter bombers on their runways. Weather logs from November record persistent fog and rain, with only scattered breaks for reconnaissance flights. In these conditions, artillery spotting was guesswork, and close air support vanished. The forest did not just absorb American firepower, it erased it. The campaign's material edge, so decisive in France, became irrelevant among the trees. Here, the U.S. Army fought on German terms, stripped of every tool that had defined its victories elsewhere. Artillery in the Hürtgen Forest did not just kill by blast or shrapnel. The dense canopy turned every shell into a fragmentation device, detonating high above the ground and sending splinters of wood and steel downward in a lethal rain. The so-called tree burst effect filled aid stations with wounds that defied standard treatment, deep lacerations, embedded fragments, and infections that spread in the damp cold. Medics recorded cases where a single barrage left entire squads immobilized, not by direct hits, but by hundreds of razor-edged splinters driven through flesh and bone. In the official medical returns, a new category appeared, wood splinter trauma, a signature of this campaign. The unseen toll ran even deeper. Exposure, trench foot, frostbite, and pneumonia accounted for 9,000 non-combat losses, men removed from the line without ever seeing the enemy. The attrition was cumulative, silent, and devastating. Before the Ardennes offensive began, the First Army's combat power had already been eroded, not by enemy tactics, but by a landscape that weaponized its own trees. In the Hürtgen, the forest itself became the deadliest adversary. In mid-October, the first attempt to break through the forest and seize the WWII dams failed. The timetable slipped, and every day lost to attrition in the trees was a day handed to the enemy. On December 13th, American units finally launched a direct assault on the dams 3 months after the original order. The effort was too late. 3 days later, on December 16th, German forces struck in the Ardennes. The Battle of the Bulge began with the American First Army already gutted by the Hürtgen campaign, its divisions depleted and its reserves thin. The WWII dams themselves did not fall until February 1945. By then, the Germans had opened the floodgates, inundating the valley and freezing the Allied advance for 2 more weeks. The timeline is not a list of missed appointments. It is a record of cascading failures, each delay compounding the next, until opportunity and advantage were both lost. Command decisions turned American strength into liability. 6 divisions were committed, thousands were lost, and objectives were delayed. The lesson is not just tactical, it's structural. Today, wars are still shaped by leaders outmaneuvered by terrain and hubris. In military history, the deadliest trap is always the one chosen. Your thoughts below.